Any new movement or community which emerges from an old tradition has to face the problem of its own identity and tradition. One of the problems with the early Christian church was that it had to face its relationship with Judaism. Jesus was a Jew, and all the early followers of Jesus were Jews, and they upheld the law of Moses, and they honored the traditions of their own people. But there's also a discontinuity with that tradition in the Christian church, especially when it came to healing on the Sabbath, attitudes towards Samaritans, and fasting. So St. Matthew, in writing his gospel, is writing around at the time when the Christian community is facing heavy criticism from the official Jewish leadership, who claims that the teaching of Jesus is destructive to all that is sacred to Judaism. So when Matthew writes his gospel, he's anxious to show that Jesus is not there to abolish the law of Moses, but he has come to complete the law of Moses. And he shows this continuity with the ancient tradition, but he also points out the discontinuity. So for the next 2 or 3 days, as we listen to the gospel stories from Matthew, Jesus will introduce what the tradition holds. You have heard it said. And then he will introduce what he has to say, which shows the discontinuity. But he's not abolishing what's been said, he's merely completing it or going further. So today, he asked the disciples to take responsibility for the charges that are brought against them. He said, if your brother has something against you, you should leave your gift at the altar and attend to that complaint first. For Jesus, reconciliation is far more important than sacrifice. That duty to make peace is more urgent than the duty we have to worship God. Because if people are not reconciled, then no amount of liturgy is going to be able to disguise the brokenness that exists in that community. In all of this, Jesus demands something more radical. His vision is sharper. His expectation is greater. I think that when we see our own record as to how we're doing, and we take our actions and our behavior and measure it against what Jesus demands in the gospel, I think sometimes we fall short. Our own efforts look a little shabby against the clear, unambiguous demands of Jesus' vision. But it's important to recognize that Matthew is not writing his gospel to grind his readers into the ground, but to make them be challenged and to recognize that they're capable of being more than what they are right now. He's calling his believers to look at the vision of Jesus with a willing heart and a ready spirit. None of us can live this gospel alone. That is why we are part of a faith community. That is why we gather so that we can pray that God will strengthen our efforts to bring this vision of Jesus down to earth.